Okay. We are going to open with a reading from Matthew chapter 5. So if you just want to, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacekeepers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you, and utter every kind of evil against you falsely, because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Thus they prosecuted the prophets before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a mountain cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. It is set on a lampstand where it gives light to all in the house. Just so your light must shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your heavenly Father. All right, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. All right, so once again, for anyone, we're kind of still having people trickle in. Yeah, we're here to talk about racial justice as it relates to Catholicism and just how best to support our members of the body of Christ who've been hurting recently. So we're going to kick it off with talking about personal experiences. Yeah, so Justin, take it away.
Yeah, so I don't know, I guess I'll be as concise as I can be. So my personal experiences, I guess I'll just reflect on the more recent events. When initially there was a lot of attention and all the protests began in response in the wake of George Floyd's death, I didn't initially hear anything until like probably 3 days into the protests as they were going national and everything. My immediate reaction is I wasn't surprised. I would say that that's probably the general reaction from most in the African American community. This is something that's been happening, long before the Black Lives Matter movement even started a couple of years ago. This has been happening for decades, even before I came into this world. So I wasn't really surprised. I was really distraught though, because, we're already dealing with a pandemic and this is happening yet again. And, and then I just start feeling like, man, what's wrong with humanity? What's wrong with people in our country? And then I started looking to, okay, what does the church say about it? Because, I've growing up as a Black man and as a faithful Catholic, there have been times where I felt like the church has not spoken enough on this issue. So I've been very attentive to see, and initially I was getting those same feelings. Okay, the church is not saying a lot. The church is not saying a lot. Like, it's the same old thing. And now I will recognize the bishops, individual bishops have put out a few different letters and prayers and have done demonstrations in support of the movement. And I'm so glad that's happening. But I'm looking at the Catholic laity, and I continue to see All Lives Matter chats. I continue to see people saying, well, we don't know what George Floyd did. We don't know what criminal thing he did wrong. All these things that's kind of like, almost besides the point, because at the end of the day, what we're focusing on is this was a person that was unjustly killed. in the custody of the very people that's supposed to protect and serve. And I don't say that to completely bash all of law enforcement. Like, I know several men and women who are colleagues of mine in law enforcement, but I also am just not going to ignore that there's a lot of bad eggs in that group as well. So that's just kind of a little bit. I could go on forever, but I want to give other people the chance to talk and reflect. So,
Manuela, do you want to talk about just a little bit about your experience? Yeah, especially on the parish level, both working in a parish and advocating right now for justice.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a Mexican woman. My parents are from Mexico, and my experience in the church as a woman of color has been very different than my white peers, and also other persons of color and other Black and Indigenous Catholics as well. And I have worked at a parish before, and I've participated in a lot of diocesan-led initiatives, and it has been disappointing to see the lack of representation in a lot of parish offices, in a lot of diocesan offices, of Mexican Catholics, all Latinx Catholics, and a lot of people who bring a lot to our faith. And so when it comes to advocating for social justice as a Catholic, it is difficult when you are presented with people who don't think that there's a problem in terms of representation and in terms of making sure other people's voices are heard. And so my experience as a Mexican woman in the Catholic Church has been met with a lot of different views. I had mentioned that I did do some work around organizing in terms of immigration, and there's a lot of anti-immigrant narratives and opinions in the Catholic Church, and a lot of, well, not the Catholic Church, but a lot of the faithful. And so that has been really disheartening to see, especially when we are talking about the most vulnerable among us. And while working on a parish level, it was my duty to make sure that other people were also heard. And so making sure that there was representation, to me, has been one of the most important aspects of social justice, whether it is working in a parish or being a part of the laity. And so it's been definitely a wild experience trying to get everybody on the same page in terms of social justice and Catholic social teaching, and making sure that we are putting our own opinions aside to make sure that other people are still being spiritually fed and that we are being Christ to others. And so that's just a little bit of my experience. I have been met with a lot of love from people who understand the importance of making sure that the vulnerable and the marginalized are centered in a lot of our ministry. So that's been a positive, and that's been a plus. And so those are just some of my experiences.
Thank you very much. All right, and then Martin, if you want to.
Yeah. So, like I said, when I introduced myself, I said I've traveled quite a bit. Part of it just because I like traveling, part of it because of my job. And my experience, what happened a couple of months ago, really, I think, let's just say I was living in denial for a long time. And I saw everything that kept happening. You just look at it and you brush it and assume, you make the assumptions, or you try to justify to yourself that, well, maybe something happened here. But in effect, you were really running away from yourself, right? And I described a scenario that happened to me a couple of weeks after that, that woke me up to my own reality. And it was a very simple thing. I like running a lot. I run pretty much every day. And when the young man was killed down south, it caught my attention for a second. And I started thinking about it for myself. And then George Floyd died as well. And I was out running, and it just dawned on me that I am not viewed like everybody else. I look at everybody else. I really don't see color per se. I look at people for who they are and what they do. But it dawned on me that, and I was telling my neighbor, I'm like, you and I live in the same neighborhood. We pay the same taxes. We do everything right. But you can walk down the street and not worry about it. And there are streets in my neighborhood I can't walk down. Why is that so? Why is that acceptable? Why doesn't anybody find that to be a problem? That I could be out just running and get killed for the sake of, but nothing else but for being born black. Where's my crime? What have I done? Did I choose to be born black? Should I be born white? What makes white different from black? And so those things just came to me. And what really brought it to my attention was so funny. It was a very small event that I was running on one of the back streets, and there was a loose dog just running around, and he saw me and he was coming towards me. And instinctively, and this is where I say my awakening, instinctively, I just stopped and put my hands up. And then I asked myself, why did I put my hands up? And the owner of the dog was just laughing. And I'm looking at him, and I know it's very innocent about it, but internally, I'm turning inside. I'm like, why am I putting my hands up? Because I've been conditioned to be afraid. I've been conditioned to be afraid. I have to show helplessness to survive. It's crazy when you think about it. Just the basic, simple things of life, you literally live with a fear, constant fear. I've traveled a lot. I've been to China, I've been to Australia, I've been to New Zealand, Latin America, and all those places. And as a Black person, and this is not limited to the US, because I studied in the UK, I have so many different experiences that, again, growing up, I used to just brush out, but this whole event just allowed me to reflect on my life. There's a very simple scenario of this in China. I go to China, to Beijing, I walk into our office, I'm the director of IT. I have a guy who's in Australia who reports into me, and then there's a manager in China who reports to that guy. And he takes me into the director's office in China to introduce me to the guy. And he says, I'm here to introduce our director from the US. And the guy looks past me, directly outside of the door, and I'm standing right there, and he's looking right past me. And he says something in Chinese. I don't speak Chinese, but it's very easy to read body language. And I looked at him and said, you're looking for the director? They're standing right here. And he caught him off guard. And he started apologizing. I said, why are you apologizing? And he couldn't explain himself. So you live through it on a day-to-day basis. I'm in London, I get on a train. I sit down on the train, and the person next to me gets up and stands up. She can barely stand. She can barely hold herself up. And there's an empty seat, and I sit down, and she can't sit next to me. I didn't even realize what was going on until my neighbor tapped me and said, don't you realize they don't like Black people, and they don't consider you to be human? That's why they can't sit in the same seat with you. Again, I laughed at it when I was young, but as I look back at it, I'm realizing you live your life literally. Like I don't even know what words to use to describe it, but you cannot just be yourself. And that is a crazy place to be. And raising 3 kids in this society, in this atmosphere, as I was describing to Savannah last time, on the greatest day of my son's 18th birthday, or the graduation, from high school, instead of celebrating that as a big event, I spent his graduation day trying to coach him on how to survive as a Black man in America, how not to get in trouble, how not to get killed on his graduation day. Basically taking out the air from his excitement of college and all those things. And instead of joining him in that excitement and everything else, I'm forcing him to watch the TV, watch what is going on, and trying to describe to him the reality of the life we live in. And that just, it kills me. But as a Catholic, what bothers me even more is what we just described here. And I mentioned this to Savannah last time as well, is that I've gotten so used to that I can read body language. It's strange, but I walk into a church and I look at the faces of people, and it's like, what are you doing here? And I'm sitting there looking around and saying, I'm in church. I am part of the body of Christ. And the other parts of this body of Christ do not accept me. In fact, in our church, in Resurrection, one of the things we did as a family is we decided to sit up front If you come to the church, about the third or fourth pew, you will always find my family sitting there. We sit up front, we dress in our African attires. It's not done by accident, it's done intentionally to carry out the message that we belong here. Whether you like it or not, I am part of this church and there's nothing you can do about it because I am a child of God, not yours, a child of God, just like you, I have a right to be.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, there's so much good and truth, and I thank you all for just sharing your experiences. Justin, I don't know if you want to piggyback off of that and talk about why, right, because it was met with some controversy, but particularly as a Black man going to a college in the middle of Ohio where there were not a lot of Black men, like starting a club for Black Catholics. But right, to say that, like, representation, to say like we do belong, and if other people come having to look for that community, like it is here, you know?
Yeah. So, well, before I get there, I just want to just kind of affirm what Brother Martin was saying. Like everything you were saying, I was just like, oh yes, yes. Like I know, like I just growing up, those same things. Just I remember, like my grandpa, my mom telling me like, oh, you can't do this, you can't hang around this many people because you're Black. And I remember thinking like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, like we don't have segregation no more. Like, what are you talking about? I used to think they were overreacting until I, eventually experienced things myself, like being pulled over, by the police, like for no reason at all. There was one time I was held at gunpoint by the police, like for doing nothing at all. And I could talk about that more another time, but but for me, like in the grander world, in the secular world, like there was this reality that I knew that being a Black young man, that I had to work twice as hard as everyone else, and I had to be very careful in my representation of myself. So I would go out of my way to not be angry at times, for example, because if I'm angry, I'm this angry Black man that's gonna immediately resort to violence. Like, so I've been very cautious of things like that, of how I present myself. And but I say that just because the one place that I never felt like I had to be different was in the Catholic Church. Mind you, growing up, every church that I've always attended Mass at, it was always predominantly Latino, predominantly African American. So like there was always like, I always saw people that looked like me, or I saw, our traditions as African Americans are a lot similar to traditions of the Latino Hispanic community. So I always felt that comfort, and I always felt that comfort in knowing that the Catholic Church is this universal church that you can fit in no matter wherever you go. I had never really experienced what it was like being in a predominantly like white context in the church until I went to Franciscan. Where the Franciscan University, it's in the Midwest, in a little town called Steubenville, Ohio. It's predominantly white, which is nothing wrong with that. And I knew that going in, but I wanted to go to Franciscan because of the reputation it has of being, this Orthodox Catholic school where you have some of the greatest minds in theology and whatnot, people like Dr. Scott Hahn. And I love the education I received at Franciscan, and I don't regret going there at all because of that. But I must admit, and Savannah knew a lot about this because I would vent to her while I was there. My first year in particular at Franciscan was very, very stressful and difficult. I met a lot of opposition from people. I would get questions like, oh, like, are you Catholic? Because I've never met Black Catholics before. Or I would have people assume that because I was a Black Catholic that I must have been a convert. that I didn't grow up in the faith, which is not true. I've been Catholic. I was baptized ever since I was a baby. So I've been brought up to church my whole life. And, you know, that may not seem like a big deal, but it is kind of infuriating because, like, you know, like Martin was saying, like, it's that body language too that you look at, and I'm looking at how they're saying these things. And, you know, I know it's like a sense, it just made me feel like that again, because I'm a Black person, there has to be a story of why I'm in this church. Like, I can't just be in this church. And it was very weird and uncomfortable. And then I would have, you know, conversations with people, and they would say, like, oh, well, that's not Catholic the way that I'm used to celebrating Mass. I'm used to celebrating Mass where, you know, it's, I guess you could say it's more akin to a charismatic type atmosphere, so to speak. Not always, but, you know, like, you won't always have gospel choirs in a predominantly African-American Mass, but a lot of times you will. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of, like, we're very, like, and again, I can't speak for every African-American Catholic community, but for the most part, we're very expressive in the way that we worship. And, you know, so we have things like liturgical dancing. And I would hear all the time from these students at Franciscan that, oh, liturgical dancing, that's not like liturgically proper. And this and that. And that was the first time hearing these things. I couldn't understand it. And, you know, but it was really hard. It was the first time that I felt like a minority in the church. And it really made me question my faith a little bit. In time, like, you know, I eventually, you know, through prayer and talking to my spiritual director back home, you know, I kind of got over that. And I'm like, I'm here to learn, you know, that they can't take that from me. The faculty here is great. But as Savannah mentioned, I had this idea, okay, you know, other than me, there's like 10 other African Americans here. You know, and there's also a few people studying from Nigeria. There was this group called Latinos for Christ. So I was thinking, oh, what if we had this group? Because I had talked to a couple of the Black Catholics that went to Franciscan, and they had shared similar experiences that I had. Some of them far worse, I'm sad to say, from the student body. And then so we got this idea, okay, let's start this Black Student Association where, you know, our purpose in starting this group was it would be an outlet for all of the, you know, the Black kids that went there to kind of come together, because we can kind of get lost in the shuffle. It's a little uncomfortable feeling, like we feel like that we're at times that we're not valued, where we constantly have to, you know, explain ourselves or prove ourselves differently. So it was a tool for a purpose. It was a purpose for us to come together and be able to, like, express ourselves and share our culture. But also the second part of that was to share that same culture with other students. It didn't matter if you were Black, white, Mexican, Asian, like Spaniard, whatever. Like, it was an all-inclusive club. And I actually wanted more of the white students to come to that so they could kind of learn about our culture, learn about why these things were so important to us. And yeah, it was a bust, just to put it mildly. I just immediately, like, I created a Facebook page for us and things like that, and we got some support. We had a tremendous amount of support from the administration, I will say. So, you know, when I talk about these things, it's mostly the student body, not so much the Franciscan administration. But at the same time, I felt like the administration didn't help us, like, address these issues that we had too. We had people that were saying, like, oh, we're racist for starting this club, and you know, what are we trying to do? We're trying to bring, like, liberal agendas here or whatever. I don't know how that made any sense, but and there was some threats too, from two students in particular who, I know one of them eventually stopped going. I don't know if it was because he was expelled or not, but one of them just graduated like nothing happened. So that when I saw that, I kind of was just like, I was really the only male in it, and there was a lot of Black women, and I kind of talked to them, and they were younger. I was a president at the time, and I kind of told them, like, you know what, if you guys want to keep trying to do this club, we can, but I'm worried for, your safety. It doesn't seem like, I don't think Franciscan University is ready for a club like this. And that was it. And the club doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, it's unfortunate that happened. But just another example of like, I guess not a huge understanding, or just there's a lot of ignorance still, even amongst our church laity. And I say ignorance because I wouldn't go far as to say that these students were necessarily being racist. I think two in particular were being racist, but for the most part, I think it was just a lack of understanding. But yeah.
Which I think, yeah, again, thank you all for sharing. And if anyone has any questions throughout, we will be kind of breaking down into more questions, but you can put them in the chat. We'll try and address them. Yeah, and like I told Justin, right, because he was actually like a very good friend of mine throughout college, but definitely the first person who really made me aware of like, because right, like I grew up in a very rural town, and to me it was just like people are people, and like, yeah. And like really starting to hear, right, like there are these cultures, and to be the only one in the room that looks like you, like I had a very eye-opening experience, like not even that long ago. I think it was only like a year, but this ministry that I was following was putting out all of this material, and everybody in the material was African American. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, so this isn't for me, like almost like I didn't belong, and realizing that is how most of, because our church is extremely diverse, particularly. So yeah, like small ways to start, right, are representation, and not meaning affirmative action, but just making sure, like, when you go to mass, are you going to see people that look like you? And if you aren't, is there a reason for that? Like, are we making them feel more comfortable, or are those those things we're not even thinking about, right? Like you see a Black man walk into mass and you kind of make that like, oh, like, yeah. So they're just small things, right, that kind of become insurmountable. But particularly talking about like the Black culture, like I think a lot of people don't see it like that. So I just appreciate you talking, speaking to that. And I know, Manuela, you had also mentioned like, Latina culture and the fact that it is so vibrant. And I don't know if you want to share just a little bit about like, good traditions, like.
Yeah, definitely. So as Justin was talking about how sometimes our cultures will have an overlap, especially when it comes to worshiping. I know that growing up and in different ministry circles, I often found myself gravitating towards the ethnic minorities, because we worship in a very different way that is sometimes not accepted here, especially in the United States. And so I know a lot of traditions that we have are centered around Our Lady of Guadalupe. A lot of the festivities that we have a tradition of honoring our dead in a very different way that is unfamiliar to people unless they have been exposed to it. So when we celebrate All Saints Day and All Souls Day, that is a very big celebration for us, and celebrating life and those that came before us, and making sure that we're aware of our ancestry has also, to me, been a little bit of a difference that I've noticed in a lot of white Catholics versus non-white Catholics, as we have a lot of roots to our ancestors, and a lot of traditions that will make us feel closer to those that came before us. And so when it comes to the sacraments are also extremely important to us. We have godparents for different sacraments, and sometimes that is not understood widely And when you are worshiping in Mexico, it's the norm. You have godparents for everything, and you grow up being raised by all of these sets of extra parents, and that's just the norm for us. And when we come to a parish in the United States that is not aware of our multiple godparent situation, people are very confused and kind of taken aback, and don't take that extra step to be aware of these different traditions that we use in order to worship. And so those are a couple of the ways that culturally just are seen very different in parishes that especially don't have a diverse population. And like I mentioned, won't take that extra step to learn how to better serve the body of Christ.
Great, thank you. So just as we're moving along, and once again, if anyone has any questions or anything else, put them in the chat box. We'll try to address them. Yes. Yeah. So Justin, I don't know if you want to, again, Justin had said his thesis was on, right, topics very similar to these. If you want to just address like a very brief history of like how the church has responded to racial injustice and racism.
Yeah, so very brief. I think a lot of, primarily probably more in the secular world, a lot of people will kind of view the Catholic Church as, like I've heard this term before, like many times, as a white racist institution. And in my, just in my research that I did, reading different texts and whatnot, I could definitely say that that's a false label to put on the church. But at the same time, I can see why people have that view of the church. Unfortunately, there has been, times throughout history where we've seen priests and religious communities participate in the slave trade. I know not too long ago, the Jesuit community actually kind of had owned up to that and kind of formally apologized for their role in that, and have been moving towards ways of of healing and making up for those past mistakes, those past sins. So to say that the church played no role in slavery or segregation, because even in the pews, the pews were segregated. If you were Black and you wanted to attend mass in a church, oftentimes you had to sit all the way in the back or all the way up high, like where usually the choir loft is at. But like fast forwarding like today, and definitely there have been certain key individuals, key figures throughout history at that same time that were combating these things happening in the general world, and especially in the church. Because one thing I can say that based on what we know about church teaching, and just things that have been addressed by several popes, is the church has always been against this type of oppression. The church could have said more about it and done more about it earlier on, but it is what it is. But moving forward, like I said, the church has corrected those things. And we know, like anyone who's like faithful Catholic know, we never claim to be just a church of us flawless saints, but we're a church of saints and sinners. So the Holy Spirit is constantly there, moving to kind of get rid of those things that is contrary to church teaching, and contrary to Jesus's message of love. So some of the recent things that I'll highlight of how the positive ways the church has reacted to racial justice. So there, as far as church documents go, the Vatican had put out a document in the 1980s called The Church and Racism. And so I definitely recommend this document. If you can definitely, if you do a search online, go to the Vatican website and type in the church and racism, it should come up. It's a pretty lengthy document. It basically addresses racism that has happened throughout time in the United States, and it also addresses not just the United States, but also in Africa as well, the African apartheid that was happening. So it's a very good document that really calls out, racism in its various forms at that time. Some other documents that, particularly from the United States, the US bishops put out a document in 1979 called Brothers and Sisters to Us. And this document was the first time really that the US bishops kind of acknowledged racism as a sin. So in some respects, it's sad that it took till 79 to acknowledge it as a sin. But again, like, very powerful document where they call it out as a sin. They talk about all these different forms of systemic racism, things like that happen in the communities, things like redlining and things of the sort.
Justin, can you explain what redlining is?
I always find a hard time to really explain. It's like basically has to do, like with certain how do I best explain it? Like basically, if you're like you think of urban communities, so to speak. I don't know if anyone's ever really wondered or paid attention to, like, it seems almost convenient that these urban communities, it's predominantly consisted of Blacks and Hispanics and Latino cultures. And I would say that's not by accident. That was purposefully done, where you basically had people like leaving, like people of high status, which happens to be predominantly white, but not always white, but predominantly white for sure, that will like leave these areas and go to more like suburban type areas. And slowly you see these urban communities being like just these tight knit communities. And I don't know, that because of that kind of brings to light a bunch of different things. It's things like that increases gang violence, okay? Because like, a lot of reason why, that young black men will join gangs, for example, is because there's no father in the household. They see no worth in going to school, because the way that the schools is like, situated in these poor urban communities, the schools are not getting enough funding. The teachers are doing their best, but, and then unfortunately you have some teachers who just stop caring after a while, because it's really a broken system. So, it's almost like in these communities that if you're a person of color living in these areas, you're set up for failure. And this is why a lot of times when we talk about systemic racism, it's in one of those categories, because it begs the question, why is it the people of color that is getting affected by this? I know a lot of people will say to that, oh, like, what about all of the scholarships that's just for African Americans? Like, there's not enough scholarships for our white students that are struggling. That's fair to an extent. Yeah, like there are some white families who don't have the means like most people would think. But at the same time, I always say, like, what a lot of times people don't realize about these so-called scholarships, for all of these scholarships reserved for African Americans, is a lot of African Americans aren't even receiving these scholarships, because again, like I said, you have these situations in the schools in the first place where none of them are actually graduating high school to begin with. So if they're not actually going to college in the first place, then they can't receive these scholarships. So then where is that money that's supposed to be for all of these groups actually going? And I can tell you, like, firsthand, when I was going through the college system, going to Franciscan, I tried really hard to find all kinds of scholarships. And I had a really difficult time, because there were some scholarships primarily for African Americans, but it was so specific, where I had to be in the seminary. I had to be wanting to become a priest. I had to come from this particular state. I had to, you know, like there was all these conditions basically, which is not unusual for scholarships, but it seems like it's even more specific for people of color. So that's kind of like a little bit like what that is. Other documents that the church put out, I'll name the most recent one. Open Wide Our Hearts is the most recent document the US bishops have put out. That came out in 2018. What I like about that document is it also addresses not just like racial prejudice and injustice to the Black community, but it also talks about other communities, other peoples of color that experience that. They talk about the kind of the whole immigration thing that's happening, that there's a constant debate in our country, and the injustice about that, and like what's the Catholic context. They don't go too much into it because they've written other documents about that, but just addressing it I think is good. They also address the kind of phobia that we've had over the past, ever since 9/11, of people from the Middle East. This phobia that like everyone who looks like that is a terrorist. They address those things. What I think is weak about that document, though, I will say, is that, and this is something that I've seen as a trend in the church that I think really should change, is there's the language is almost, and I would love for people to read this and we can discuss this maybe, but it seems to me that the language is really powdered to not offend white Catholics. I don't know if anyone has read that document, or like I see some people shaking their heads, so maybe you know what I'm talking about. Because not only on that document, but you see that in other cases too, where there's almost like a, let's be careful not to offend, to offend our white Catholics because their numbers are huge. We don't want them to make them feel uncomfortable, which I know is a real thing. Like a white person may feel like, I don't feel comfortable talking about racism because I feel like that I'm getting judged all the time. Or like, why is it that like, just because I'm white, I'm viewed as racist, or like I have white privilege, which I'll stop there because then I know there's more to discuss with those topics. But
yeah, I just want to touch on what you described there because that is my view. And I think that to your point, the church has put out a lot of documentation and all the rest, but I think that to me, I almost ask the question, what are we afraid of? Okay. I mean, we are the church. I mean, and I go back to my Bible all the time and I look at the life of Jesus, and I don't think there's any scene in the Bible where he backed down from what is right. What is right is right. Doesn't matter. And the fact that the church, even including our church, we are always catering, as I call it, we cater to certain feelings because maybe we are afraid of the financial losses, or we are afraid that people might walk away. To me, that is it's doing the body of Christ a disservice. We need to stand up. Okay, if the church drops down to 3 people and they're true believers, you can build the church from there. But if you cater all the time and compromise your values, then really, what are we standing up for? What are we doing? Okay, what are we doing? And this is, to me, is the biggest part of it, is that from everywhere I've been, when these topics come up and people want to talk about, oh, we don't want to do this, or we don't want to do this, we got to be careful about why. What is wrong, and what is right is right. What's wrong with calling it what it is? What are we so afraid of? As individuals, our job really is to push that button and let everybody look in their soul. It's not, as you say, it's not to call people out, but let the truth speak for itself. And we all can go in our rooms and go in our bathrooms and look in the mirror and truly ask ourselves, are we living up to that picture, that image of God? Are we really the disciples of Christ? Or are we building out a version of this Christ that suits our needs? And then we are living up to this new definition of Christ. Because again, if I look in the Bible, everywhere I go, there isn't a situation that he didn't stand up for, including telling his own disciples if they wanted to live. Why are we afraid?
Amen. Which is why I started with, Matthew 5, trying to think. You are the salt of the earth, like if salt loses its taste. And I saw a really good article the other day that was written by a nun about not politicizing this issue. Like everyone gets very upset, with the Black Lives Matter organization. It doesn't support, XYZ Catholic belief. But at the same time, like, we're not proposing a solution then. Like, here's something that does support Catholic belief that still stands up for this. It's kind of, I've seen like this wall go up rather than it being, okay, like, so what do we need to be doing? Like, what is that step forward? What is something we can support? But exactly that, like the church is kind of not, I want to say like the church as a whole, just like there are definitely subsets or the laity or whatever you want to call it. We're getting tied up in this like minutia rather than looking at it as this is life or death. This is respecting life. This is understanding, regardless of where you fall on even like immigration, those are human beings. And I think a lot of times it's just not looked at like that. It's not, this is my brother in Christ. So not to put you on the spot, but Manuela, I don't know if you want to talk about like as a woman of color, like what it's been like particularly to see like silence by certain like church leaders or fellow parishioners.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I said, or your fellow parishioners or whatever.
Yeah, sure. It's been really disappointing because I feel like there are times where we are kind of praised for the things that we bring into the church, whether it's our culture or our like our families and our different networks. And then when it comes time to standing in solidarity with the people that are hurting, people are usually met with silence, and they don't have a problem with lauding the things that they deem positive or the things that they deem important. But when it comes time to the things that the different communities that are hurting are seen or are important to them, it's like, well, that's not my business. I will let you all deal with that. And so that lack of solidarity really does hurt. And so when we are looking around and people are more upset over inanimate objects than souls being lost to the injustices that exist within our country, it really makes us question who has been sitting in the pews with us and why are they not caring about my life? And so it's a challenge for those of us that belong to marginalized communities to continue fighting for justices for our own people, as well as trying to find people who are continuing to fight for us. And so that silence is truly deafening, and it just makes us question a lot of maybe past friendships or current friendships, and then also leadership as well. Like, is there a reason why you're not saying something? Are you trying to find the words? Are you trying to look for resources? But then you also get to thinking, well, I think it should be a very immediate reaction to injustice to speak out against it, especially when you know that the body of Christ is hurting and you willingly kind of turn away from that.
Yeah, which leads into, we'll start answering the questions, right, that were submitted and that have been put in the chat. And I've appreciated the little comments in the chat. Way to go, guys. But one of them, right, is why is it so hard for white people to talk about racism? And I've been really reflecting on it for myself because, like, just these slow, small realizations that I've had. I was telling Justin earlier that, like, I was definitely one of those people that was like, slavery happened a long time ago and didn't understand, right, all the systematic things that have been set up in society to just really, there's no other, hurt those communities and hurt those individuals and make them feel less than. And so I think, and what I've seen, right, it's a lot of fear. It's a lot of I don't want to say the wrong thing or offend somebody. And we need to listen. Like, that's the primary thing. Because at first I was like, yes, I am not a champion for this, certainly, but like, this is the first time I have really been empowered as an ally, I feel, to like, enough is enough. Like, I have to speak out. And I said my entire Facebook feed has just become baby photos and anti-racist things. But like within that, right, like seeing like, you know, there are people who have dealt with this their entire lives. This is nothing new. And they know kind of what needs to be done, what needs to be said. And so we do need to listen, but also we do need to support them and stand up, you know, above everything else for them. And right, I teach elementary. So like, I was thinking like, how can we address this? And my thing became like, put it in as part of anti-bullying, you know, like, how do you be a good friend? How do you stand up for someone? And then addressing diversity. Recently, I butted heads with someone because it's my baby. Because a lot of people, you know, just in, especially within the diocese, a lot of people are white who are running church ministries, and that's not a criticism on anything else. It's just like, right, that's the perspective we're coming from. And I was like, we haven't really highlighted a lot of saints from other backgrounds. Like, and I even went through our VBS program, and 4 out of 5 of them were all white. And so kind of really took that to prayer, had one of the other volunteers look at it, and like but so basically we diversified, and like, just right, because also at Resurrection particularly, we have a very diverse group, particularly of children. And so like, realizing, right, even though I might not necessarily be uncomfortable if all the saints are white, like, that doesn't make me, like, the kid who never sees a saint that looks like them, it does suddenly feel like, okay, I can't be, you know, and they're there. I was not aware until earlier this week. The Korean, yes, Andrew Kim, but the there are the most Korean saints, like, that of any demographic. And just stuff like that. Again, like, these beautiful cultures that the church has to contribute. But if we never highlight those, if we never give notice to them, if we continue to kind of run through the same, you know, motions, we're not including, we're not being the universal church. So, yes, that has become my little, but yeah, right. So listening and making sure that everybody feels included. Like, again, not to the point of affirmative action, not to the point of we're doing it just because, but really looking at, like, you know, is everybody feeling welcome? Is everybody feeling like they belong? Also speak up against it, even if you're white. So any of you can answer now, any of you 3 who wants to. The first question is, what is a microaggression? Anybody?
I can go. A microaggression is something, it can be an action, a statement, a comment, just anything that is passive, and picks at the personhood of somebody, especially somebody of color or a Black or an Indigenous person. And examples of microaggressions can be, oh, you're really smart for a insert ethnicity here, or touching a Black woman's hair without permission, or a Black person's hair without permission. Saying, oh, you don't look, I've gotten so many, you don't look Mexican comments, because people live with a stereotype of what a Mexican person should look like. If somebody says like an anti-Muslim comment, and they'll say, oh, XYZ Muslims are all terrorists. Oh, but not you. You're the good kind. So having that like good ethnic person versus bad ethnic person narrative, and we see that a lot in immigration as well. Just bad immigrant versus good immigrant, instead of seeing the person as a whole. And so those are just some examples of microaggressions and what that entails.
Thank you. Next question. Is there a problem with saying, I don't see color?
I mean, for me, I think it's context driven. Really, it's context driven. I say that personally because one of the things I admire most, you talk about kids, I love kids. And one of the things I love about kids, and I always tell people, you don't see a racist kid. Kids are not born racist. They don't really have color. To them, color is actually more fun. They play with everything. They enjoy each other's company. And then adults infuse in them a behavior, and they adopt that behavior, and they become. My 16-year-old received more messages from her friends, classmates, supporting her and telling her how they will fight. Not that they understood what fight meant, but they will stand behind her, and they were calling her nonstop when everything was exploding on TV. 16-year-old. They haven't been exposed. They still are very innocent. They're living their life the way life is meant to be lived. So I don't think it's a problem saying I don't see color. Again, it's all context driven. If you use that in a context where you're trying to hide, because this is why I always say that you really have to look inside you and ask, why am I making that statement? You know, and this is why I always say the journey is back to your heart. All right. As one of my good friends who is on the chat here, Javier, keeps telling me, the longest distance is where from your head to your heart. Because when it comes from your heart, then color really doesn't matter. When it comes from your head and you're using words like that, you are trying to justify an action. Why are you, again, back to the point, what are you hiding from? It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to say things out of ignorance and get corrected and truly feel it and then learn from it. But if you avoid it because you are trying to shy away or you're trying to pretend to be something that you are not, it comes out very clearly. When you have lived on this side of the fence for a long time, you get very good at picking up those things. I mean, you pick them up so easily and you can see them from a mile away. So personally, I don't have a problem with it. Again, it's all context. What is in your heart that you're trying to convey with that message? Because we don't want to get to a point where we become so sensitive that we can't even open up and speak because we are afraid to use the wrong word or the wrong dates, because then we're drifting away from the story again and we're looking for other justifications. Let's just be ourselves, but come from your heart. If you are, as I always tell people, there's nothing like a good or bad racist, but I prefer the racist that will stand in front of me and say I'm racist. I can handle that. I hate the one that hides behind and pretends to be my friend. I have 5 friends, they are black and they're this and that, and yet your behavior tells me that that is just an excuse. You're hiding behind something. So again, you can use the phrase, it's all about context. Where are you coming from? Where's your base?
Yeah, going off of that, I think a lot of well-meaning white people will say, I don't see color as a way to say, I will see you as a whole person. I think the damage comes when somebody hides, like you said, hides behind it instead of trying to engage in conversation and appreciate the differences of everybody. They'll say, oh, I don't see color. And that's an excuse for their racism. So I don't see color as a phrase is a form of covert racism. And so like when we are talking about that phrase, we have to be really mindful of, like he said, the context in which we're using it. Are we hiding behind it, or are we trying to say that we are, appreciating somebody? And then if it's in that case, then I think we should find other words and different verbiage to use when trying to say that you do stand in solidarity with somebody, or you do appreciate that they come from a different background, instead of trying to just dismiss maybe an uncomfortable conversation that you're having, or if you're being called out. And then also just to not be afraid to have these conversations. I know it's really scary, but this is lifelong work. So we'll have to have uncomfortable conversations, and we have to be open to being corrected. That's how we're going to learn and how we're going to better serve our brothers and sisters in Christ.
So great. All right. How do you assess whether our parish is meeting the needs of people of color?
I can give some background on having worked in a parish and how assessing those needs. And so trust is really important in a community to be able to have open dialogue needs are being met or not. And so when you try to figure out if someone's needs are being met, the best way is to directly ask them, making sure that it's in a non-confrontational setting. So when you're coming up to a community that you're trying to serve, making sure that you've been present in their community and learned of their various needs and have made efforts to do outreach and community building, and then just asking them, are we doing an okay job in serving your needs? Is there anything that you would like to see from us, and how can we better serve you? I think that's good communication is always the foundation of any successful project or any successful endeavor. And so keeping those lines open and building that trust, I think, is one of the ways that I've assessed success in different communities. And then being a parishioner now, not so much in the working for a parish, having somebody come up to me and say, hey, what would you like to see from us, is always very affirming.
All right.
I was just gonna add one thing to that. Like, I agree 100%. It's just, I think that's just a basic thing that should happen anyway. Like, whether it's about whatever, just, you should just dialogue, just ask someone like, oh, like, what can we do to better, serve you? I just, in general, honestly, it's like, especially during COVID, we all need to be asking that to our parish communities, whether it's about, culture or whatever it may be. The only thing I wanted just to add to that is, I know a lot of conversations I had with students at Franciscan when I would talk about, things that I was used to in Mass. And just because I'm used to something and I would like to see something doesn't mean I'm expecting it every single place I go when I'm going to Mass. Like, it's kind of, I think it'd be a little like crazy for me to expect that if I'm going to go to a little rural like community where it's predominantly white, that I'm going to be seeing liturgical dancing and gospel music. No, I'm not expecting that. All like I'm expecting is just to have that understanding, that willingness to at least try to do something different, maybe on certain feast days or whatever, maybe. So.
Cool. All right. Somebody posted in the chat, I don't see younger non-panelists on the camera, and at the risk of overgeneralizing, are you seeing and experiencing less racism from younger people?
I think I described that in my last comment. I talk about young people generally, yes. I think they are more open, they are more willing. Maybe they're just more daring and they speak more. But again, it depends on where you come from, because I have found some young people who are very racist, and you don't have to look far to find out where that's coming from. I can almost tell you that. When you see a young person behave in a certain way, look up top, look at the parents, and you'll see that behavior. It's funny because there's a YouTube video actually circulating in my community, talking about this young kid, I think she's like 15 years old, arguing with the parents about racism. And it's very funny to find this 15-year-old defending Black people and trying to educate the parents about why they should not be treated the way they're being treated and how their parents are being unfair. And yet the parents are using what I call the classic argument for justifying it. And that tells me that this kid is probably more engaged in her community with other people and has seen a lot of those things happen. But generally, I don't find it a lot, especially, again, if you are in a metropolitan area like we are, with more families mixing around the schools and all the rest. You don't see that unless you have a particular case where this is being, I almost call it bred at home, basically. Because again, you are a product of your of your environment. So if you live in a house that is driven that way, then eventually you're going to become that way, sometimes just for survival's sake. And it's funny how we can go from what I call conscious to subconscious behavior, right? If that's all you get all the time, or look at that TV program, look at that Black guy, he did this, look at this, then naturally you become that. And so, but I haven't seen a lot of the young kids I'm very impressed with. Again, talking to them and having some of them walk up to me and make statements. I look at them and go, wow. Some days I feel like this world is not worth living in. And then you meet a kid like that and you go, wow, there is a future after all. So it's good to see.
Yeah, to add to that, I'm trying to think of this resource. If I can find it, I definitely will share it with Savannah, where maybe she could share the next time or somewhere. Um, I can't. It comes from a psychology text that I was looking at in a class I took recently. But it's basically this chart that shows like a progression of prejudice, where exactly how Martin is explaining that it's not necessarily that someone is born with it. It is literally instilled into them as they grow up, depending on what their environment is like. And it's not just in the household. Someone said this in the beginning. It's what the media is putting out there too. The way that the media portrays people of color, like, now I think we're seeing more good examples of people of color in film and everything in a positive light. But for the longest time, we've seen negative connotations of people of color, in cinema and in TV. And we still see those negative connotations, like from the overall media and the news. Even with these protests, we see a lot more attention given to the more riots that have been happening, where you have these people who may have initially started off peaceful, but then these other people came in and ruined that. Why does the media not like to show the positives? Because it likes to feed off of the drama, off the negativity and all of that. So all of those things like plays a role into the development of how one has a prejudice. And then the other thing too, and this will be the last thing, like talking about like, does racism is it exist in young people? We talked about, Manuela has talked about microaggression. And, I'm pretty sure familiar with like stereotypes. There's like all kinds of stereotypes that we have for whether you're Black, white, Muslim, Asian, Hispanic. One thing that I constantly get on my youth about all the time is watch how you're talking to, watch how you're joking about these stereotypes. And it's not, and let me just say, it's not just coming from white people. Sometimes people don't like to admit this, but it's the Black people that do it. It's the Hispanic people that do it. Like, no, and I'm constantly getting on them about this. I'm like, hey, that's not funny. Like, how do you know that person is not, taking that to heart? How do you know they're not saddened by what you're saying? Like all these stereotypes, they don't know you're joking. And when does it not become a joke? It's almost, so it's really like basically like a spectrum almost, you can say. Like you may start off by just joking, and then how much do you keep on joking and joking until you start to really have that perception becomes that reality. So yeah, I definitely don't think young people are immune from it. I think it's all just based off of like what they're being exposed to.
And that's what I was going to say is like, particularly working with teens, right? Like they have grown up in this very connected culture, and like, meaning with like social media and things. And this has also been basically their entire adolescence, their entire growing up has been these egregious crimes happening and people slowly coming to respond. So like, it is just a lot more present, I think, for them. Than it certainly was like even when I was growing up a decade ago. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go for it.
No, yeah. When it comes to like the younger generation, so I am terrified of teenagers. They scare me because they are so bold in their approach to life in general. I think they're like, you know what? We have nothing to lose. Let's go for it. And so I definitely draw a lot of inspiration from the younger generations, particularly Gen Z, because they truly are fearless and ruthless. And so a lot of my inspiration comes from them. And we were talking a little bit about media, the way that the younger generations consume media. is oftentimes really intentional. So when they are involved in any type of organizing around social justice or things like that, they will use social media to communicate with each other if they're on the ground. And this is cross-generational as well for anybody within any type of social movement. They will use social media in ways that we definitely don't if we're not involved in some type of movement work. And so when they are consuming media, it's not a lot of mainstream cable news networks that they're consuming. They are on Twitter, they are on Instagram, but they are making sure that they're connecting with each other on what's going on the ground. What are the things that we're not being shown on mainstream media, and what can we do to mobilize? And so I think that's also why a lot of younger generations' actions are really immediate, is because they are plugged in intentionally to the things that they're consuming, and they will just be informed all the time. Sometimes I get my news from them because they'll just know exactly where to point me and what to do. And so I think their communication styles are also different. And so they're, I think, less likely to sit in on a Zoom call talking about this, and more likely to be on Instagram Live or on like Twitter, just doing those things. So I think that also like noticing the different ways of communication, like cross generations, is also important, just how they plug into different movements as well.
Yeah, which is what I was going to say too, right? Like we all have our different niches, let's call it. And just because maybe a certain demographic is not presented here, like that doesn't necessarily say anything. That doesn't mean that the older generation is more inherently racism or needs to be more educated or whatever. It just means that, you know, tonight, this is where we're at. Which, I mean, we're all here fighting for the church, fighting for, you know, equal justice for all. Definitely. So we are going to start wrapping up. I do want to give, especially right relating to this topic on like maybe generational things. Next week, same time, same meeting code and password, we are going to do another panel on how to talk to your kids about racism as a Catholic family. So once again, coming at it from Catholic social teaching, we're not politicizing it. Anyone is certainly free to listen in. It's going to be, right now, a lot of moms coming on and just talking about, from various racial backgrounds, how they've had to have these conversations with their kids. And it's been really eye-opening for me because I kept asking, there's just this reality. I kept asking white people, oh, how have you done this? And like got no answers. And a lot of the African-American mothers were like, oh, let me tell you, when he was 4 and he came home, and like, it's just this, again, like their entire lives versus like, we're kind of able to hide from it sometimes. So that'll be happening, and I'm really excited. I think we're really blessed with our panelists this week, and I'm really excited for the ones next week. So, okay, so last question, and I think this is bigger than any of us and above our pay grade, but will systemic racism be able to end in the law system? Like, be ended, I guess, by the law system? And I have opinions, but please.
No.
So
I'll give you my simple answer, no. And I'll give you my experience why I say no. When I was in college in the UK, I had an incident where somebody walked up to me and literally headbutted me just because, again, being at the wrong place. Okay, smashed my glasses. Got arrested, went to court. I walked up to court, and you could sit there and watch the police officer who arrested the person twist the story to the point where it became a non-issue. Watch the judge accept that, refuse to let me present myself, pass judgment on, I found the guy guilty, but the penalty for that was to pay me £1. A British pound was $1.60. And that's all the guy claimed they could pay a week. £1 a week, which would have taken him well over a year to buy me a new pair of glasses. In the meantime, I walk out of court without glasses. I have to go find money to buy a new pair of glasses because of who I was. I am in court. I'm a victim. I'm not allowed to talk. The laws are there, but the laws are there to be interpreted by human beings. So if the judge, the jury, the prosecutor, and all are lying behind a particular story, I don't care what law you put in place. This is why we talk about policies and practices. Policies are written on paper. Practices are things that we do. And if you can take a case that happens in downtown New York and move it to Albany for the case to be judged there because that is where the predominant white families live, the police officers live, what are you saying? That you want a different verdict because the verdict will be driven by the people whose families are affected in the case. So I don't think that the laws will change the system. People have to change if they want to change. It has to come from people standing up. And I will say this, it sounds crazy, but all the marches that we do and all those things that are going on are great, but the change comes when the majority accept that this is wrong and take part in it. And I think I mentioned this to you, Savannah, last time we talked. The biggest thing I see that really excites me is that when I watch these marches like the one that took place in Colombia, when I look at the audience and I find more white people marching than black people marching, there's hope, because it's going to take the majority to step up and say this is wrong. So policies, laws, and all the rest are meaningless if you cannot carry them out. If a black kid does something wrong and gets 20 years in jail, and a white kid does the exact same thing and gets a misdemeanor because the system feels, you get what I'm getting at. So the law itself is of no use if it's not interpreted properly, and it's interpreted by who? People. So if those people are already prejudiced to start with, then there's no hope.
Yeah, there have been a lot of great revolutionaries throughout the centuries that have talked about these systems and what it would mean to live in a world that is free of systemic racism. And so we know that systemic racism exists in mostly all of our structures, legal structures, financial structures, the education system, the healthcare system. And so in order for these systems of power to be equitable, they have to be destroyed and reimagined. And I know that sounds very extreme, but we also have to think to when were these systems built? And so a lot of these systems were built when enslavement, chattel enslavement was still legal. And if we've done work and learning into like the current prison system, we know that enslavement continues to be legal, and it just looks very different. And so the systems, we like to say, oh, the system is broken, when in reality it isn't. It's functioning as it was meant to function, because these systems exist to oppress non-white people. And so in this country, they were built to oppress Black people. And as other minorities started coming to the United States, we all just kind of also fell into that system of oppression. And so when talking about ending systemic racism, we have to end the structures that continue to support these unfair and unjust systems.
Yeah, I also agree that no, it won't. If you really look at the history of oppression just in this country alone, with Black Americans, so every time that it seems like that injustice is being undone, there's another one that takes its place. So after the abolishment of slavery, you have these mass lynchings happen. And then after that's combated with the post-Reconstruction, you have these new Jim Crow laws and segregation laws. And after that was combated with the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act, we have today mass incarceration, which is the new Jim Crow, like the modern day slavery, where you have so many people of color who are in the prison system that are, as Martin was kind of sharing, that are serving sentences like, well above than what they should be serving and go beyond far that. I think Savannah mentioned that some of you in the parish are watching and reflecting on Just Mercy. As that film highlights, there's a lot of innocent people in the prison system right now. So even if that gets fixed, there's probably something that's going to take its place. So I definitely agree with Martin and say that the real, and this is what the church says, as a matter of fact, that at the end of the day, what's going to solve systemic racism, what's going to solve racism in all its forms, is a conversion of heart in every person. Now, I believe that wholeheartedly, but what I don't want people to take from that is, let's just sit around and wait for these people to not be racist. No, everything has to have an action. So it is our job, whether we're, whatever our position is in the church, whether we're catechetical leaders, whether we're just your everyday parish goer, the priests, the bishops, everyone, it's everyone's responsibility to really do what you can, call for this conversion of heart. You need to this is why we need to have these conversations. This is why if you're a white individual and feel like you're afraid to speak on racism or injustice, or you don't have enough to say because you're not a person of color, that is wrong. You have a voice, and that voice is powerful. We need you as allies to talk to these things. We need to take this issue seriously as a pro-life issue, because it is. And only then, when we act this way and we educate ourselves and we constantly pray, and I'm not saying just say you're going to pray and you don't pray, or you're just going to say one Our Father, or you're just going to no, actually pray. Really take the time. Prayer is so powerful. I know some people say, oh, I'm tired of hearing praying, but no, prayer is powerful. We've seen examples throughout history of how powerful prayer is. So yes, we need to pray. We need to seriously pray. And when we do all those things, that is what is going to actually force these conversions of heart to happen in people. It's happened. We've seen little minor examples of it happening, but it does happen and it is possible. But it's going to require action.
Yeah, to kind of go off of what Justin said real quick, definitely prayer and action is what's going to, get us to having these conversations and to having concrete change, making that lasting positive impact. And so when we're thinking of, how to end racism, that's so daunting of a task. And some people do get overwhelmed and they're thinking, well, there's, I'm just one person, what's going on here? And so I think we have to also remember we're not just one person. God created us uniquely and gave us talents for a reason. And so, with that prayer, discerning how our action is going to look like within our own vocations. And so it's just, how is dismantling racism going to look like in my family, in my ministry, in my job? Am I talking about it with my coworkers, with my family members? We talked about how, racism is learned, prejudice, hate, discrimination, those types of things, but also love is. And knowing how to make that positive impact and teaching our children how to do that. And then, going for the conversion of souls and trying to, make that lasting impact. And so definitely just looking at it and how does this look like in my vocation? How am I going to make this lasting positive impact where I am and the people around me?
Amen. And I do just want to put it out there, we are starting a very intentional just support of racial justice, as a Catholic Church, as the community of Resurrection. We are very lucky. Father John is extremely on board. And he gave us the instruction of basically, you can't address it enough, for the next year, or however long, just, which is not, the case everywhere. So I think definitely, praying for our leaders, praying for particularly our church leaders, that they will just have that boldness to be able to speak, and all of us in our own lives. Yeah, and just don't be afraid. You know, Jesus says it so many times. And I want to say, like, right, like Justin has dealt with a lot of my ignorance over the years, and he's been very gracious. But right, it's been solely through these conversations that I've kind of become savvy to this. In terms of like steps and praying and stuff, like one of actually my husband's friends, not even my friends, started this like group where it's just nightly people are getting on and praying a Divine Mercy Chaplet to end racism. And that's how I met Manuela. We've only known each other for 2 weeks. And then Martin got on the Just Mercy talk last week and just like gave us some truth and talked about his experience and is now here. So like, right, like this conversation, these conversations, these different points, these prayers, these connecting as Catholics, like it is yielding beautiful fruit just in our community. And I can speak to that from my own life. Secondly, you will face oppression. That's why, again, we chose the, you know, blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. I've gotten a lot of negativity just in trying to address this. And I'm not saying like, oh, look at me. It's more of like this reality. It has only been from white people. Pretty much every person I've talked to of color, even if I've been doing it wrong, has said like, no, like, but thank you, like for trying. And I think there's that reality too. We need to look at ourselves of when other people are addressing it, why do we have that reaction? You know, you're doing it wrong. Anyway, I'm tired. You're tired. Let's end in prayer. And so what we're going to do is first a litany, and it's titled the Litany of June, but we're just going to pretend it's not. And then people submitted different prayer intentions. So we're going to first do the litany, then pray the prayer intentions, and then we'll be good. So, all right. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. All right, so I'm going to read the line, and then the response will be, deliver me, and till it gets to Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it. So from becoming defensive when confronted with my own racism, deliver me. From being too lazy and arrogant to educate myself on racism in my own community and country, deliver me. From only caring about social and economic issues that directly affect me, deliver me. From capitalizing on another's tragedy artistically, socially, or financially, deliver me. From mourning the loss of property more than I mourn the loss of human life, deliver me. From belittling the pain and fear of people of color just because I haven't experienced it personally, deliver me. From speaking more than I listen, deliver me. That I may do the right thing instead of the easy thing, Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it. That I may create the opportunity to sacrifice my pride, time, and money to make this world a safer and more beautiful place for everyone. Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it. That I may communicate this prayer with grace, love, and humility. Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it. And then, all right. So if we could just, after this, just Lord, hear our prayer. So the suffering of injustices throughout our country and the world, we pray to the Lord. Lord, hear our prayer. For all the families from our parish that are struggling currently because they are facing situations of discrimination or difficulties due to their nationality or the color of their skin, that we may be more sensitive to them and more inclusive. We pray to the Lord. That the United States have free and fair elections. We pray to the Lord. Pray for our prayer. For a change in heart and for the guidance from the Holy Spirit, we pray to the Lord. For Caroline's mother's healing of suspected COVID, for her kids' safety, and for mental and physical health, we pray to the Lord. And for lives lost to gun violence, especially children in our cities in this past month, we pray to the Lord. All right. Oops. Okay, well,